E4 and E5, the opening moves of Hikaru Nakamura versus Vidit Gujarati. Round 2 of the candidates. We're looking for the next challenger to world champion Ding Liren. 4 games to come, all with bloodshed. We're going to keep it moving at a quick pace. So we see a Spanish game with bishop b5. The Berlin defense selected. No castles, going for the queenless endgame with knight takes here. Instead, d3 covers the pawn. Now bishop c5, c3, the player's castle, and you can go d6, d5. We see d5 later on in another game, but d6 played in this one, h3, knight e7, d4, and now everyone and his dog goes bishop b6. But Vidit goes c6, a novelty, never seen before that means. What's going on here? Well, if you capture, this is Vidit's point. He's going to win the bishop here, knight rotates, he's a pawn down, but he's got pressure on these 2 weakened pawns, and he knows what he's doing at the end of the day. It's computer prep. So Hikaru doesn't go for it, drops back with the bishop to cover e4, bishop b6, and now you can play steady with some knight bd2, rook e1, but instead we see captures, Hikaru winning a pawn, principled move, and now look at the sniper. This is why they don't need to develop so early into the game. They can do damage from the starting square, we see it here, and Hikaru doesn't take. What's going on with that one? Well, then there's queen b8. This is playable for white, but Hikaru rejected it. Bishop f4 covers the knight. Bishop c7, no way to defend further, so you just have to save the bishop. This a sample line, very playable for white. Different way to go, but again Hikaru rejects, goes for knight c4, but it's not a precise move. We get bishop g4, picking up tempos against the queen. No f3 of course, the pawn is pinned, so queen c2, bishop c7, now joining a very dangerous attack against the white king. Hikaru goes for e5 to block that bishop, open his own battery, which now crashes through on the black king, king h8, and now he has some crazy tactics going on. He can try queen e4. Hang on, what about f5? If takes on passant, knight takes, you're on these 2 and defending the bishop, doing great. Well, this is the tricky point. Bishop takes pawn possible. This is the sample line, check. King goes and bishop g5 to get back the piece. It's very complex because you can still cover, but then knight d6. If takes, pawn takes, you know, deep stuff, right? But this is playable for white, technically okay. But Hikaru drops back with the bishop, but now b5. The knight stumbling back and not f5, knight takes on e5 first, f5 on the way, so winning back the pawn, attacking here, covering this one, and now Hikaru plays a dreadful move. Before f5 comes, we're going to keep the camera rolling, we've got lots of games to cover here, so this one's attacked. He should take here. Vidit then has a choice which one to take, right? Both are playable for black, keep an advantage, but Hikaru does neither, doesn't take here. He goes bishop e2, and now when f5 comes, this is the move I was looking for earlier. There's just this huge attack. All the black pieces participating. Ideas of spinning around with the queen. So Hikaru goes gung-ho, but it's a bad move. f4 just opens his king. Bishop b6, what a play. If you take here, well, the knight's coming straight in. There's so much pressure in the center, you can't cope. Then the queen's soon joining the party. It's devastating. So we don't see an immediate takes of the knight. Instead, king f2, Hikaru going bomb cloud styley, but knight d5 comes anyway. Rook h1 check, king g8, takes on e5 played, and the queen joining in the fun. So much pressure on this knight. King e1 steps away, the knight drops, Vidit in control. These were the moves that started to wrap the game up now. Queen hit, side steps, check, king in the center of the board. It's miserable, and after this discovery is set up here, b2, knight f1, discovered check, Hikaru resigns. Because if you step with the king, there's knight g3, you go to Forktown, Vidit here smashes the world number 3 in 29 moves. This is the power of engine prep. Incredible. Jump to the next game now. We're going in with Pragg versus Gukesh, the clash of the young Indians. What a game this was. Pragg goes for a Catalan. We get the check. Then we see takes, Gukesh a pawn up, and he wants to hold on to it. In compensation, Pragg takes the centre. a6 looking for b5, it's played, queen e2 to bring the rooks, bishop b7, rook a d1, and knight a5, opening the attack on the e4 pawn. So d5 now played by Pragg, and the game explodes. Because after captures, he's not looking to take back, but push with e5. Common attacking idea, clear some squares for the pieces, open a diagonal to the king. And now e6, what an aggressive move. The computer just wants to keep on taking, munch the material. But f5 done by Gukesh instead. We see knight e5 now hopping, knight f6, and the top engine way to play is slowly. Rook fe1, bishop d4, then hop into f7 with the knight. But Pragg goes for queen c2, going after the f5 pawn, and Gukesh responds with c6. He's diamond hands on those pawns, wants to hold on to them. He's not selling. We get queen takes on f5, queen e8 defending the light squares, knight f5, and it's not a good move as you can see. Again, rook fe1 preferred by the engine, or g4, very aggressive idea. But this played, bishop c8, spinning back, beautiful defense here from Gukesh. We get rook fe1. If you take, will we recapture with check, so you don't immediately win the queen. So knight b7, coming back into the defense, bishop g5, rook a7 for some lateral defense here, and after bishop takes on f6, bishop recaptures, Pragg just has to go for it. Say he plays for an attack over here, a bit slower, well the knight hits c5, and there's just so much pressure on this pawn. It's a big problem. So instead, Pragg picks up the piece and sacrifices his bishop. He's got to play for initiative. It is the best move. Bishop e7 played, not going for pawns, instead doing defense. We see queen g4 looking for an attack, but not best. Knight h6 preferred. If captures, then there's queen g4 check. If the bishop comes here, we've got f4 attacking ideas. If the king sidesteps, then there's queen d4. You're picking up that loose rook, which was put on a7 earlier. So knight h6, the way to go. Missed. This was played, but now Gukesh is consolidating. Pieces coming off the board. Pragg hits the loose rook. It's saved. Rook e4 played. The queen hit. He's desperately thrashing around here, Pragg, looking for a way to break through, but what to do? Now Gukesh unraveling. The king pressured, but the pawn drops. h6 was simply met by rook takes on f2 and resignation here. This is such a deadly discovery. If you sidestep with the king, well now there's rook d7. There's a piece dropping in the middle of the board. This mate is covered. It's not a big deal. That is such an epic defense by Gukesh, and he takes down Pragg. What a clash. We now jump to Caruana versus Abasov. We've got Nepo versus Firouzja to come. Excuse me. So Fabi kicks off with e4. c5 from Nijat. He does want to play aggressively. Love to see it. We get a Rossalimo on the board with bishop b5 and e5 selected. Many moves playable, of course. e6, g6. This one looks to clamp on the dark squares. Castles, bishop d6 played. Looks weird, but if d4 ever comes, then the bishop opens up. Plus it can slide back in certain lines. d3 now on the board, knight f6, knight c3, castles, h3, a6, and Fabi simply chops. Yes, he gives the bishops, but look at all his pawns on light squares here. It's a closed position. He wants to maneuver with the knights. Rook e8, queen f3 looking more at f5. So g6 covers, but now Fabi comes to pressure on the dark squares. Bishop e7 back. Queen e3 clears the way for the f pawn in future. We get knight h5, an exchange of bishops here and simple chess. Fabi brings these knights back around, coming backwards to then go forwards. Beautiful f4 break. Captures played. These ones come off, rook recaptures, and this is an unpleasant pawn structure. It's covered in just a moment with the rook. Rook f1, you've got 19 points of pressure barreling down the f-file. King g7, and now Fabi is the one with the pawn breaks. He finds a great move here with pawn to b4. Captures played, but not queen captures. Then e5 comes, opening the rook on the queen, and there's pressure on f6. Therefore, we get rook a8. Now the king sidesteps, just safety first chess. a5 to break with that backwards a pawn, captures and takes should be played. Potentially Nijat scared of queen b6, invading, pressuring rook and pawn, but it was still the best move. Instead, we see this move of c5 blocking out the queen, but now Fabi holds on to his extra pawn and it's a huge distraction. Rook a6, e5 now comes, no time to take, or else you get this kind of line, these ones being attacked, queen e3, and there's huge pressure here, knight e4 coming. So instead f5 blocks down the file, c4 now comes, captures, pawn recaptures, rook fa8, coming after the a pawn, but Fabi now covers with the knight. The rook holds the c pawn. That's why g5 to kick the defender. Queen g3 pinning the pawn to the king. We see h6 defending, rook f2 takes on c4 played, but it's a mistake. Yes, you win the c pawn, but you relinquish the defense of the f5 pawn. And now Nijat just crumbles. His best move is queen e6 here, but white remains in the driving seat. Takes, however, played, queen recaptures, rook wins the pawn, but Fabi switches the attack. No time to slam a rook down here or rook f7 check. You're picking up the lady here. So what to do? The king steps back, rook f7 anyway, and we see resigns. If you take this pawn, well, you're simply getting mated. Rook f8 check. This is a sample line, king g7, and pick your way to mate. You can use either of the squares. Therefore, resignation, not premature. Resignation, sorry. This is just game over. e6 also coming if black goes for different defenses. So that's our third game. We jump to our fourth. Nepo with white opens with e4. We get another Roy Lopez Berlin defense. We saw this just now, but instead of d6, we get the immediate d5 break. Captures, queen takes back, bishop c4. Now we get the expansion on the queen side by Nepo, and after a4 he's gunning for b5 one day potentially. He plays so enterprisingly this game, looking for initiative. Alireza going for this pawn, so queen c2, knight d5. Now this knight hits the outpost on e4, and Alireza comes here threatening to double the pawns. Nepo just ignores it. Queen a2, going for the knight, knight b6, bishop b3. Alireza shatters the pawns and then wins a pawn. Looks horrendous, but watch what Nepo's got planned. First king g2 to cover this one. The queen drops back. Rook d1, hit that lady, queen e8, and now h4. So aggressive. Now if you take, not good. The rook hits h1, it's a huge attack. Queen c2 coming, knight g5, a lot of paint on the board, but keep your eye on this one. Alireza goes knight c8, and look at the journey that knight's on. h5, king h8, h6, met by g5. Completely wild game, but good defense by Alireza. Now queen d2, coming onto the dark squares, knight d6, bishop b2, eyeballing the black king, and f6 is prudent here. Set up the old camel toe pawn formation, as we like to call it. Rock solid, don't touch the knight just yet. Try and get some more pieces into the defense. But instead we see knight f5. Alireza super aggressive as always. We get check, king f1, f5, kicking the knight and winning the pawn. This trio of dragons looks so strong, but you are expanding, creating weaknesses around your king. Nepo counters, one knight attacked, Alireza attacks this knight instead. So knight e4 played, knight a5 hits the bishop, it slides into e6, and now g4, the best move for Alireza, because if bishop captures, there's this check and you win this one here. Doing well. The game remains very complex, but queen g6 played. This is so aggressive because you're ditching an entire bishop, which Nepo takes. You can't take the knight on e4 or you get mated on g7. So this pawn then drops. Alireza looking for the big attack. Bishop f7 played, covers the rooks coming to the e-file, and now the check. King e2. Queen f5 here, going after the knight on e4. So it's covered by the bishop. Completely wild game. Now Alireza hits the queen. Nepo doing great, but it's still so complicated. Big swings in the bar, hugely possible. Queen g4 now sets up a discovered check on the king, and so Nepo takes a wander into the middle of the board. Look at this crazy position. Love when these guys play. Rook d8 from Alireza hits that bishop. c4 covers. Now we get takes on d5, just throwing fuel onto the fire. More discoveries set up. Alireza on seconds here as they come to time control. The knight blocks. Great move by Nepo. If you capture, then there's this whole attack going on. White doing great. You can force the queens off, get to this endgame here. So the knight not touched. Instead, knight c4. What is going on? That one's simply taken. But then you take here and you've distracted the queen away from joining this attack on the king. This was the point. Pawn captures. We get this one flicked in. The rook now attacks the queen, supported from afar by its own queen. Therefore, Nepo goes rook h1. Doesn't even move his queen. What a battle we've got. Queen d7, queen e4. And after these couple of final moves, Alireza simply resigns. He is an entire rook down. You can take here, say queen recaptures. But what to do? You're a rook down. Pawns are level, nothing to play for. Absolutely wild game, but Nepo comes out on top with more great preparation. Fascinating tournament so far. These are the standings after day 2. Smash subscribe if you're loving these recaps, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.